In the Redlands this week, plans for a major indoor sports facility in the Redlands are moving forward, but not without debate over how it's being delivered. A push for stronger koala protection sparks disagreement inside council chambers, and the one Greater Brisbane suburb still offering houses under $500,000, but for how long? Hey, Adam here, welcome to the Redlands update for week 12. Let's get updated. First up, plans for a new indoor sports facility in the Redlands are progressing, but the way it's being delivered is drawing some scrutiny. Council is moving ahead with the project, which is expected to deliver a large multi-court indoor venue designed to support local sport, competitions, and community use. And with population growth continuing across the region, demand for indoor court space has been increasing, particularly for sports like basketball, netball, and volleyball, where access to facilities can already be limited at peak times. But where the discussion has really centred is around the delivery model. Council is exploring a public-private partnership, where a private partner would be involved in funding, building, and potentially operating the facility. The argument for this approach is that it can bring the project forward sooner and reduce the upfront cost to council and ratepayers. At the same time, some councillors have raised concerns around transparency, particularly around how decisions are being made, what information is being shared publicly, and what the long-term implications of the partnership could be. So while there's a broad agreement that the facility is needed, the debate here is really about governance, how major projects like this are structured, and how much visibility the public has into that process. Now to an issue that's particularly relevant to the Redlands, koala conservation, and it's one that's been a long-running concern in the region. Council is preparing a submission to the state government calling for stronger protections as pressure on koala habitat continues from urban development and land use change. But within council, there's been some disagreement about how that should be approached. Some councillors are advocating for stronger and more immediate protections, arguing that without intervention, local populations will continue to decline. Others are taking a more cautious approach, raising concerns about how additional protections could affect landowners, development potential, and planning processes. So while there's general agreement on the importance of protecting koalas, the discussion is really about where that balance sits between environment protection on one hand and housing and development pressures on the other. And that's not a simple question, particularly in a region like the Redlands, where both of these pressures are very real. Now to flood risk, and this is one that's very relevant for parts of the Redlands, particularly around Redland Bay. New investigations into local waterways have looked at where flood risk could potentially be reduced, but they've also highlighted some of the challenges involved. In some areas, there are opportunities to improve drainage and water flow, which could help reduce the severity or frequency of flooding, but at the same time, there are environmental constraints that limit what can be done. That includes the need to protect existing ecosystems, vegetation, and waterways, which can restrict large-scale engineering solutions. So what you're seeing here, just as with the koala conservation, is a balancing act. There are options to improve flood resilience, but they need to be carefully managed to avoid unintended environmental impacts. And that means progress in this space is often slower and more complex than people might expect, but also more constrained than it might appear on the surface. Now stepping back for a moment, Redlands City Council has reported a $32.4 million surplus, but importantly, Council has also made it clear that this isn't necessarily an ongoing position. Results like this can be influenced by timing differences, when revenue comes in versus when the spending occurs. So a surplus in one period doesn't automatically translate into long-term financial stability. And that context matters because it helps explain some of the decisions we're seeing around project delivery, funding models, and prioritization. So while the headline numbers sound positive, the underlying message from Council is more cautious. This isn't a signal that there's suddenly extra capacity for spending, but rather a temporary position within a much broader financial picture. Now to a development that's still in its early stages, but that could shape part of the Redlands coastline over the longer term. Initial steps are being taken toward the revitalisation of Raby Bay Marina, with early planning work underway to explore what that precinct could become. At this stage, it's not a fully defined project, but the focus is on improving the marina as a destination, potentially enhancing retail, dining and public space, and making better use of the waterfront location. Developments like this typically evolve over a long time frame, but they can play an important role in local economic activity, tourism, and how people use these spaces day to day. So this is one to watch as more detail emerges. And finally to housing, and one of the more interesting pockets of the region's market right now. Russell Island has been identified as the last remaining suburb in Greater Brisbane with a median house price under $500,000. In the current market, that's become increasingly rare. That affordability is attracting attention, particularly from buyers who are being priced out of the mainland suburbs. But as always, there are trade-offs. Living on Russell Island means relying on ferry connections, having fewer local services and amenities, and a different day-to-day lifestyle compared to mainland areas. So while the price point makes it more accessible, it's not a direct substitute for other parts of the region. And like we've seen elsewhere, as demand increases, even these more affordable pockets may not stay that way for long. If you want to stay across everything happening in your local area, you can check out the updates for Brisbane, Ipswich, Logan and Moreton Bay in the playlist here and in the description below. And if you want the full picture across Greater Brisbane, here's the overview video. See you there.